harder to explain.
Right, some of the ideas.
And interested in what other people were doing or what they were thinking, and very aware of it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special Blackwell's event for Mental Health Awareness Week. My name's Alice, I'm the events manager at Blackwell's, and I'm delighted to be here with you all this evening to talk about Living Better, How I Learned to Survive Depression by Alastair Campbell. If you're having any tech issues, you can send us an email to virtualevents@blackwells.co.uk, which should be the reply email address on your invitation from Zoom, and we'll do our very best to sort those issues out for you. If it would be helpful, you can turn on closed captions. You go to the live transcript option down at the bottom of your screen with the CC logo, and you can choose to enable or disable the closed captions in there. We'll be answering some of your questions towards the end of the evening. So if you've got something that you'd like to ask Alastair or Fiona, you can pop those questions down in the Q&A box. We'll be inviting some of you to put your questions to Alastair yourselves. If we've chosen your question, I'll send you a private message in the chat, and when Kay says that we're going to your question, I will enable you to be able to talk so that you can then pose your question to Alastair. This will just be audio and not video, so no need to worry if you haven't dressed up for the event. You'll still be able to put your question to Alastair directly if you'd like to. If you'd like to tweet about the event, you can use the hashtag Blackwell's Living Better and the Mental Health Awareness Week hashtag, which is hashtag MHAW. And I'll drop those and all of our handles into the chat box in just a second to make things easy for you. And I think that that is everything from me. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to our wonderful host for this evening's conversation, writer and broadcaster, Kay Burley. Kay, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hello everybody. A very good evening to you, beautiful view outside where I am here in the Cotswolds at the moment. Hope you're having a fantastic evening. Whatever you're doing, I'm lucky enough to be able to interview Alastair this evening. I've done it many times in the past in many different guises, including one time when he interviewed me with his daughter Grace for a podcast that they do. I need to put my glasses on because I thought the best way to introduce him was via his Twitter handle, which says writer, communicator, consultant, strategist, mental health campaigner. And he's certainly all of those. But the reason we're talking to him today specifically is about his latest book, Living Better, and Alastair, I'm glad to say, is with us this evening. Hello to you, Alastair.
How are you?
I am sensational. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm absolutely exhausted. I do not how you telly people do that every day.
What time have you been getting up?
Well, I've been setting the alarm for 4, but this morning I couldn't sleep beyond 10 to 2.
Yeah, so it's tough, isn't it?
You can't. It's like jet lag. You just wake up and you think, if I fall asleep, I won't wake up. And so, yeah, I've enjoyed it, though. I've enjoyed it.
Good. I set my alarm for 3:17 a.m. I'm very precise. Anybody who gets up early regularly will tell you within a minute or so what time they get up. How's it been? Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, actually.
Highlights? The boss was on this morning with you?
Yeah, that was good. And it was, we knew we'd get the usual hate of, a couple of war criminals together and you can only get his best mate on. But actually, I think it was really interesting. We had a genuine discussion, which he and I have had a lot about, because he sort of understands why Boris Johnson has this certain appeal. I just can't see it. I never have been able to. And also, I did tick him off over what he said about me and mental health in his book, when he said there were two kinds of crazy people who are just crazy, and people like Alastair who are kind of creative geniuses, blah, 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 which I said was horribly stereotyping. Yes. But no, I thought, listen, I still think Tony is the best political communicator. He's one of the best on the planet, to be absolutely frank.
Well, he's certainly that. But hopefully you told him off about his hair as well. In fact, I think you did, didn't you?
I did.
Let's talk about the book, shall we? You're a journalist, but you're perhaps better known to date as a writer and a shaper of politics. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit more detail a bit later on. But talk to me about the book, Living Better. You have struggled with depression for a very long time. Why have you written about it now?
Do you know what? I mean, who knows? I've written 17 books and I never know why you write them at the time that you do them. I've done my diaries, when I've done my novels, when does the idea come into your head? I think this one actually flowed from the television documentary I did for the BBC about my depression. Because you know this better than I do. You make a documentary, you spend hours talking to people who put their life and soul into something that they're expert about, and you end up with like a 50-second clip. And I had all this stuff that was kind of on the kind of literal, the virtual cutting room floor. And I thought, I think I should try and turn it into a book. And then I know what publishers are like. I knew that they would also want the really personal stuff. So I made it half about me, my life, my story, my family, and half about all that kind of research I've done into trying to help people deal with it better.
Here's a tricky question for you. And I don't know if you know the answer. And I don't know if anybody knows the answer who suffers from depression. But why do you think that you suffer from depression?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. And I think I've seen, you know, I've only seen a psychiatrist regularly since 2005. I say in the book, I was self-harming. I was physically beating myself up and stuff. And I'm sure, I love him dearly, David. He's absolutely fantastic. He's best. But I think he still thinks there's something deep inside that we haven't got out yet. And I don't think there is. I had two great parents, both, you know, very long, happy marriage. I had two great brothers, fantastic sister, a nice childhood, you know, fantastic family now. I think some people get it and some people don't. Now, I know there are other people. So, for example, I write in the book in the stuff about psilocybin, the psychedelic drug, a guy called Ian Roulier from Watford. When he tells you his life story, you know why he gets depression, okay? Horrible childhood, horrible. I've not got that. And I just think some people get asthma, some people get diabetes, some people get depression. It doesn't mean there aren't other factors that link to it, but I don't think there's a single reason that I can ever been able to put my finger on and say, that's why I get depression.
But you say fantastic family, and they certainly were. And you can tell from reading the book how close you were to your brothers. Sadly, neither of them any longer with us, but your sister Liz is. But, you know, one of your brothers suffered from schizophrenia. I know that you have a phraseology for that, and I'll let you correct me. And the other one of your brothers had an addiction. So is there an argument for genetic links to depression?
Well, the thing about that is you mentioned my sister as well. She had eating issues at a point as well. And I met her son, my nephew, who I talked about on the program this morning, because Andy, the competition guy on GMB, is his hero. He once said to my parents, how come that you two are the most sane people I've ever met, have produced these four? And it's an interesting point, because on my mum's side, a teetotal, there's suicide way back several generations. My dad's side, there's a bit of suicide, there's quite a lot of drink. But no, there's nothing. And I explore genetics in the book with a woman in Canada who's a genetics expert. She says there's no automatic genetic link. And I think it's a combination. Of course, there's something that may be in your past. And I know from having been at the birth of our three children, there's definitely something in all of us that when we come out, we've got our own personality. And it's totally different to the others. So very close to my brothers. One of the things about Donald, you mentioned Donald, the brother with schizophrenia. He, by the way, is the real reason I've always campaigned on mental health. But he actually taught me a lot about how to deal with it as well, because, you know, his illness way, way worse than mine. But he was always able somehow to kind of understand that it's a part of life, but he's never going to allow himself to be completely defined by it. So he actually did get on and do amazing things. The worst thing about Donald is that because there's been such, you know, lack of proper research into medication, the medication for antipsychotic illnesses, for psychotic illnesses that he was on for 40 years, it takes 20 years off your life on average. People with, you know, who are on those drugs, it's not that the drugs kill them, it's that they wear down your immune system. So eventually he died from respiratory stuff. So that's, you know, and that's something we've got to get this better medical research going on.
But he still managed, like you, I mean, obviously his illness much worse, as you say, than where you found yourself today, but he still managed to keep down a job, didn't he? Very successfully. He
managed to keep down a job partly because he had an amazing employer. He was in the army. He was invalided out of the army when he was diagnosed. He then sort of took it quite a long time to get through that. He then kind of drifted quite a lot between jobs. And in fact, we had a hilarious thing the other day. An insurance policy came in. He started selling insurance, and I was always his first customer. So I had all these policies. I don't know where. Anyway, one matured the other day. It wasn't worth very much. I didn't even know I'd had it. But he then, because his big love was bagpipes, he was in the Scots Guards. He was in the Scots Bards.
Both of you played together, didn't you?
Yeah. We played together a lot. We learned together, and he was in the 1st Battalion pipe band. And the bagpipes is the passion of his life. Music. And I always think the music with Donald was because of partly he was so good because he was playing with the sounds in his head, because he did hear voices and all that stuff. And he got a job at Glasgow University in the security department, and they discovered that he was a fantastic musician. So he became the university piper, and he had that job for 27 years. And they were brilliant with him. They were absolutely brilliant. When he got ill, and he usually got ill, by the way, when he felt okay and he stopped taking his medication. And then he'd go haywire, he'd go off the rails, and they were brilliant with him for 27 years. And that gave him meaning, it gave him purpose. He had his own house. He's the chaplain from the university who came down for the funeral. He said, he didn't know anybody who had as many friends as Donald. He had a great life. It's just that it was, it was minimized. It was diminished by this horrible, horrible illness.
You wouldn't talk about your depression though while you were at Downing Street. That was obviously a conscious decision. You only talked about it or really addressed it by looking towards the psychiatrist after you'd left Downing Street. Why was that?
I didn't not talk about it, but I didn't talk about it in the way that I do now. I did several reasons. One was my mum didn't want me to talk about Donald. It wasn't that she was ashamed of him. On the contrary, she thought he was amazing, but she was really worried that if she hated me being in the public eye, she hated it. Used to make her ill, all the pressure, all the horrible things. And her neighbours used to regularly, so she didn't get the papers, but they'd regularly sort of get the Daily Mail or the Daily Telegraph. Oh, Alice's in the paper, here you are. And when she died, we found this mountain of old press cuttings, most of them saying I was, Hitler, Goebbels, all that stuff. And so that was one reason. She didn't want me to talk about Donald because she didn't want him to be under any spotlight. And also because I didn't really think it was my place. I mean, I wasn't the public figure. Tony Blair was the public figure. I know I became very high profile, but it wasn't kind of deliberate. I did do one big thing for mental health when I was in Number 10. I did a thing with Mind where they asked me to do an interview with the Sunday Times magazine when it was just beginning. People were just beginning to talk. And I first said no, but then I thought, sod it, I should do it. And actually it produced my mum's favourite ever picture of me.
Yeah.
Brian Amos came in to do some pictures, and you know this as well as I do, that he did all the sort of formal stuff. And then when we were having a break, I just leant against the wall and I just went like that with my hand. And it was a brilliant photograph. And my mum absolutely loved it. So I got that photo and shut it home.
I want to bring in Fiona in just a second. Long-suffering Fiona, some might say, your partner of many years. But
some might say that, but they do.
Yeah. But before I do, I know that you rate your mental health, because we talked about it before, every day on a scale of 1 to 10. And you always say, I'm not going to a 1 or I'm not going to a 10 for obvious reasons. You don't want to get off the scale, as it were. What were you this morning when you woke up?
This morning was very, very strange because I woke up so early. And it's just an instant conversation that I have inside my head every morning. And I do it now. I literally go, how do I feel? It might be when I get to the bathroom, or it might be when I get downstairs. Today was actually pretty good. I was just on the right side of the middle, which is actually where I like to be. So it was kind of 3.5. So okay. one is kind of manic oblivion, and 10 is suicide. And I was about 3.5.
Fiona's with us. Hi, Fiona. There she is. Hello, Fiona. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Yeah.
Do you know when he wakes up very quickly which number he's going to be at?
Not immediately, but I know that if he doesn't get out, raise his head from the pillow straight away, there's probably something up. Yeah.
Talk to me about how you have coped with Alastair's depression over the years, because it is just as challenging for the partner, isn't it?
It is, and I'm slowly realising that it's not only me that finds it challenging, because for a long time I thought there was something wrong with me. How do I cope with it? well, better now than I did at the start, because I think understanding what it's about has really made a big difference. But, you know, I have to say that about 25 years, I didn't really understand it at all. And I thought there was something I was doing wrong, or he was very angry with us, or why couldn't I make him happy? And, you know, he could be quite mean as well. So that was very hurtful. Yeah, so it was tough. But it wasn't like that all the time. A lot of the time we were happy and having a great time. But when these bouts happened, it was really difficult to comprehend.
As an example, tell us what happened on Hampstead Heath when you went out for a walk together, and that was a very disturbing few minutes as you were walking together.
Well, that was after 25 years, I think, and we were having an argument about something. I was going to speak at a meeting at the House of Commons, I think, which was vaguely critical of Tony Blair, and it was a trigger, I think, for Alastair just kind of losing his cool completely, and he started just shouting and punching himself in the face. I mean, basically self-harming. It was terrifying. And I mean, I suppose for a moment, I thought he might turn on me, but he didn't, and he never has done. But it was very, very scary. And that was the trigger for seeking psychiatric help, yeah. Do
you remember that, or how do you remember that incident, Alastair?
Oh, I remember it vividly. In fact, we quite often walk up on the heath, and I sort of have a little look at there's a tree lying on the ground there where it happened. And as you know, Kay, looking at your wonderful view, I'm obsessed with trees at the moment. Are you one tree of the day today? I've already posted. No, honestly, even as tears were filling up my eyes when Fiona was speaking there, because I do feel bad. I still feel bad about the way I used to treat her. And I think what's been brilliant about seeing David, the psychiatrist, is that he is the one, I think, that has persuaded Fiona she should never blame herself. And he's also kind of helped me to understand that even though it's difficult, I have to be more conscious of the impact that my moods are having on other people. Because what happens when you're in that state where, self-harming is a form of wanting, you basically, I'm at 9 then, that was at 9. I basically wouldn't, in that moment, I wouldn't really have minded if I've knocked myself out, and I was just so, I can't even describe it. I felt like I was exploding inside with rage, with fear, with anger. And the big thing that was going on was that I thought I'd done everything. I've stopped, I stopped drinking in 1986. I've left this fucking job that was doing us both in. I've tried to do everything to kind of make things okay. And this fucking depression keeps coming back. And I think Fiona's right that it was a trigger, in that I thought, not to put too fine a point on it, would I have stayed with Tony Blair if Fiona hadn't I don't know, maybe I'd hit the end of the road anyway, but at that time I felt that she'd forced me out. And then she was suddenly going to be doing this big thing at the House of Commons, critical of the government policy, wanted me to go as the supportive partner. I knew that I'd get there, and the media would be there wanting to see whether I was, because that would have been the first time I'd ever criticised. And it all just exploded. It all just exploded. And I can remember that, I do remember the terror on Fiona's face, because I think she did think I was going to turn on her. That I was hitting myself so as not to hit her. I was actually hitting myself because I just couldn't cope anymore.
When you listen to what he's saying now, Fiona, how does that make you feel?
I understand it more, because it is incomprehensible. It's really scary seeing somebody you care about lose control of themselves. And it's not the first time it's happened to me, because, Alastair had a breakdown in the 1980s, and that was my first experience of it. And I felt, here we go again. It was just, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. Yeah. It hasn't happened since then. It's happening.
Yeah, although you did have a breakdown, didn't you? Was it back in 1986? And he was hundreds of miles away, Fiona.
Yeah.
It must have been impossibly difficult for you. You were with your dad. He brought you up to Scotland to see him, and you saw him in the hospital bed, and you saw him. He was a broken man. How did you feel at that moment? Did you think, I can keep going here, or this is just too much?
I thought I have to help him get better. I mean, I'm probably there's a bit of me that wants to kind of, be always the person who sort of helps the injured party. And I just thought, I've got to try and help him get better. I mean, I'd already made a decision at that point that I was going to stay with him, because in the run-up to his breakdown, he was really, really crazy, absolutely crazy. I remember my dad saying to me, you've got to decide if you want to stay with this guy. And we'd only known each other for 5 years or something. I had decided that. We were having a breather when he got arrested for taking his clothes off and decorating the police cell wall with lots of graffiti. So I did decide I wanted to make, but you know, I was so young then, 28, I didn't really understand. And I'd been to talk to this guy he worked for and said, I think Alastair's having a breakdown. He said, I don't be ridiculous, he's fine. He'd just carry on working 12 hours a day and drinking 16 pints and everything will be marvelous. And, you know, I felt that was, a lot would fall on me then, because obviously a lot of people very quickly didn't want to know him. It was quite fascinating how quickly he sort of fell from grace in those sort of Fleet Street terms. But yeah, I don't think I knew how difficult it would be actually, and I wished I had done. And if I can do anything useful now, it's to help other people to understand the same situation, some of the shortcuts it's taken me a long time to find.
And I want to talk about that in a bit more detail, but you decided then and there, Alastair, more or less to give up drinking. That has helped significantly, but what else has helped for you to be able to control your levels of depression?
Well, I stopped drinking and didn't touch it for 13 and a half years. And I used to count the days. I was well into the thousands where I was, you know, I knew to the minute, you know, I used to sort of say, right, you know, 7 years, 6 months, 8 days, 3 hours, 24 minutes. I used to have it in my head. I think Fiona and I both agree now that drink was an issue, but wasn't necessarily the issue that led to the psychosis. Because what happened, I did stop drinking, but the depressions kept coming. But I think because I'd stopped drinking, I'd convinced myself that was the really tough thing. I wasn't addressing anything else. So I'd say all the things that I've done to address it have actually come in the main since 2005, since actually going through this properly. And it was very, very painful. I mean, you know, it was, I think again, some of the sessions that we did together was touch and go, you know, because it was very, very painful. And then into the middle of all that, we had our son alcoholism, and that was, you know, adding not just pressure, but, you know, for me, a lot of guilt as well. And so I think it was what I've done now, though. I mean, you know, looking after my body, sport, diet. This is not a good week to see this, but I really look after my sleep. Writing for me is incredibly important. I mean, I think Fiona, it drives her mad sometimes, but I write thousands and thousands of words every day in different sort of forms. That's important. Music's incredibly important. Playing the bagpipes, particularly since my dad and my brother have died. My football team, I know people laugh at this, but my football club, and I think it's taken Fiona 30, 40 years to understand this, my football club really, really matters to me in a way that a lot of people just cannot understand. It's not just about football, it's about something much, much deeper.
Takes you to your happy place, does it?
Yeah, my two happy places are Turf Moor, the same as Jordan North, and the Lido. Absolutely, yeah.
Fiona, what sort of advice can you offer people who, you know, will be watching today, not necessarily because they suffer from depression, but because they've got a family member that does, and they must be at their wits' end and think, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this situation.
I think have confidence in your instincts. It took, you know, I knew there was something wrong for a long time, but I didn't really have the confidence to either confront Alastair about it or try and talk to him about it. I think if you really think there is something wrong and the signs are quite sort of disturbing, you've got to try and take action if you can, and that in itself is difficult. And the other main...
Yeah, how does that manifest itself? What do you do? Who do you turn to?
Well, I think I should have said, I should have realised when he came out of his depression, stopped drinking and thought he was fine, he cured himself, that actually he wasn't fine at all, because his moods and his, you know, he was just not fine. He either threw himself manically into work, or else he was comatosely depressed and impossible at home, but perfectly charming with people outside the home. And I took the blame for it. I never actually addressed it with him and said, do you think there's something still going on with your mental health? I mean, mental health wasn't talked about in the way then that it is now.
But was there some concern that you may make it worse if you did challenge it?
Yes, because I think people who are mentally ill can be quite manipulative. I mean, that's a harsh thing to say, but I think it's interesting because I've got this little group now of people I meet with who are in a similar situation. One of the things that's come up is this issue of gaslighting, is that, you know, a lot of people are made to feel that they're the one that's mad. No, that I'm perfectly fine. What are you talking about? You must be mad, you know, because I'm fine. In fact, Alastair wasn't fine, but he made me feel like I was crazy for thinking there was something wrong with him. I should have had more confidence in my instincts. And the second thing is not to blame yourself. That isn't to say that I probably didn't handle things well at time, but fundamentally he was ill and that wasn't my fault, really, but I took a lot of the responsibility for it. And a lot of the time I just got very angry and hurt, you know. I used to go and swim for hours on end, pounding my way up and down the pool, or, you know, I can remember crying once in Hamleys, going to buy some toys for the kids, and I just thought, I can't go on with this anymore. But you do put one foot in front of the other, and then it passes, and then the times are good again, and then it happens again, and that's when you've got to really think, is there something, this is deeper than just a sort of difficult personality.
I think the other thing, Kay, just to jump in there.
Yeah, do.
Well, it has been really interesting, because when I wrote the book, and I gave it to the publisher, and they really liked it and all that, and Georgina, the editor, she said, so I read this book, and it's really a book about you and Fiona, but we haven't really got Fiona's voice in it. It was their idea for Fiona to write the chapter, the afterword, what's it like living, being the other person. And actually, I'd say that the response to the book has been as much about that as the rest of the book. And this group that Fiona's running now is from people who've just never heard anybody in the public eye or in the public space talking about, well, it's, fucking hard for the partner.
You stop swearing.
Sorry.
It's so rude.
Sorry.
Yeah. Remember
how hard was it to write, Fiona?
Actually came out very easily. I really enjoyed it. It was very therapeutic putting it all down on paper.
Get it off your chest.
Yeah, off my chest, thinking about what happened, trying to analyse it a bit. And yeah, I could have gone on actually. I could have gone on a bit longer.
Well, I've been trying.
Remember, I was so busy multitasking, I never wrote the diary. So Alastair has the diary. I have to dredge everything out of my memory. And some of the things I think I've just put into a sort of dark place, and I haven't really wanted to look at them again.
I want Fiona to write her own book, but not just about her, but about other people as well. I do think there's an amazing gap here in terms of, and I saw this with Donald when Donald was the ill person.
Your brother. My
brother, both when he was first diagnosed, although they were quite nice, given it was a military psychiatric hospital, but it was pretty rough, it was a pretty tough environment. But also subsequently with the many hospitals that he'd been in during the last 40 odd years, families, they're not really taken into account in terms of, because there's such that focus on the patient. So I can remember once Donald was taken to a hospital up in Scotland, and I can't remember, we'd been somewhere, I think we were abroad, and I went back and I went to see him. And you just end up with this sort of feeling of utter helplessness, right? But there's nobody, they're not thinking of you. And I'm not criticizing them. They've got a massive job to do looking after the people, but they don't think of the people who are actually going to have to pick up all the pieces.
And often by his side when you went to see him in hospital was your sister, the little one. She was the youngest of the four of you, Liz. She sought solace lots of times in God. You famously have said, we don't do God, when it came to Tony Blair and he was asked about it. I remember when he was in Downing Street. Have you ever reconsidered your view of religion?
Well, there's a difference there. I've always been very interested in religion. And actually, I'm it's bizarre, quite a good friend of the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's, I think I'm his kind of pet atheist. And so I'm very, very interested. I've always said I'm a pro-faith atheist. And actually, Donald got quite a deep faith towards the end as well. And I like faith. I don't like this kind of people who sneer at sort of religion. I like the fact that my sister has that sense of absolute, solace and faith. But no, I still can't. I can't get there. I still feel I'm interested in it. I think it's a sort of fascinating area of our lives and our minds. But no. I've had very spiritual moments. I think I get real moments of spirituality, often in grief, actually. I remember when Philip Gould died, who you knew. When Philip died, I remember I was up in the Hebrides making this, doing this film where my dad was born. And there was this, I was out in this, I just went, again, I couldn't sleep. I went out in the middle of the night. I went for this walk on my dad's favorite beach. And I'll never forget it. These three birds came flying over, and Philip's daughter, Georgia, what was the story, Fiona, about? They were obsessed with the three little Bob Marley, the three little birds. And the
Three Little Birds is a song by Bob Marley.
The three little birds came over, and I sort of, oh my God, there's Rory, Callum and Grace. And then this bigger bird came in, and then there's Fiona. And then there's four birds came in. I got it's Philip and Gail and Georgia and Grace. And honestly, that's the closest I've ever got. And I was thinking, this is God. It was really but it was a profoundly spiritual thing. Anyway, I went away and played my bagpipes and it went away.
Tell me about your group, Fiona, and what people can do if they want to be involved, or whether they should set up their own.
Yeah, well, it's very fledgling at the moment, but I've in the past few weeks, since we've been talking more about the book, I've had quite a lot of people contact me. So I'm trying to think how we can roll it out and, you know, accommodate more people, really. It's just a very informal, I mean, it's sort of loosely based on AA, where you get together in a safe, confidential space and everybody can share their stories and hear other people's stories and realize that they're not alone. I think we can take it further, but it's been very interesting how many people have contacted me to say, oh yeah, I'd really like to join that, because I just felt very alone. I feel very lonely, and hearing you speak is the first time I've heard somebody express how I feel, and I find that quite moving, actually. And I mean, that is only the tip of an iceberg, isn't it, really?
How do you deal with his depression differently now to 20 years ago? Because there are still times for Alastair when, you know, he will lie on the sofa and ask you to cancel appointments for him because he just can't.
Well, I don't feel so guilty, and I don't allow him to make me feel bad. And I'm afraid to say I sort of let him get on with it, unless I think we're veering into a really dangerous place, which we haven't done for quite a long time, I think probably because of the medication. I mean, there have been some few really scary moments where I could tell he was verging on feeling suicidal. But I detach myself from it in a way. I detach myself from it. Yeah, it sounds a bit heartless, but it's about self-protection.
The thing I'd say about that, Kay, is that when I used to think it was heartless, but what I think now, when I'm in that place, I want to know that Fiona's near, but I don't want her in my face. So actually, I'm up at the top of the house now. Fiona's down 2 floors in her sort of office. And that's how I like it when I'm depressed. I don't want her constantly saying, how are you, what's wrong? I don't want that. I just want to know that she's there. And I want to know, and then I want to be allowed to retreat into myself. And I do now have all these different techniques and tactics that I can sit up here. They don't always work, but I do now deploy them. Sometimes it is just lying there until it passes, and that can be hours, it can be days, you know. It's a long, long time since I've had one that's gone on for into the weeks, which is what it used to be.
We're going to open up to questions in just a second, but I did want to just explore that with you a little bit further. You've talked about people committing suicide and how there should be sympathy. Some people feel that people who commit suicide should have no sympathy. Others are the other side of the fence. I mean, you have contemplated, you say in the book, no longer wanting to live. What stops you from planning to actually the deed itself, even when you're in your darkest moments?
Well, the first thing is I would never, ever, I hate it when people say suicide's a selfish thing. I think it's really cruel. I think suicide is the ultimate in mental illness. When your rational mind believes that death is better than life, then I think that is the ultimate in mental illness. And also, Kay, I love you dearly, but I honestly hope you don't ever use the word commit suicide again, because we say commit because it used to be a crime. It's not a crime.
What phrase would you use?
I would say ended their life, took their own life, ended their life through suicide. The act of suicide is killing yourself. It's called commit because it was a crime and it was a sin in the eyes of the church. And listen, I'm not criticizing because that is what we've all been grown up to say. It's like, you know, you talked about schizophrenia. I really hate it when I hear football commentators say, you know, oh, well, at Arsenal, it was like watching a schizophrenic performance. They were brilliant in the first half and crap in the second half. And I want to scream, you know, we cut the labels matter. And what stops me, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I've been close. I think probably family in the end. But the thing is, I've got a chapter in the book about my cousin Lackey, who he killed himself 21 years ago. And I think, I mean, honestly, he looked like me. We were similar age. He was from the Hebrides. So we're different background. We both played the pipes, very competitive, all that. A lot of similarities.
Spent summer holidays together.
We used to spend our summers there. And that's another reason I wanted to write the book. And I wanted to write about suicide because I've got very close to his children. You know, one of whom, John, is he's another one who's obsessed with bagpipes. And I know, so they've now lived longer without their dad than they lived with him, right? But whenever I talk to them about it, I know that this is still in them like every day. And I know it's had an effect on them. And I don't ever want them to think that he killed himself because of them. I know, having been in suicidal ideation, I have times when I have been genuinely suicidal, one of the big motivations is thinking, Fiona's going to be happy without me. The kids will, why should the kids have to put up with this crap of me, you know, not speaking for days on end? Why should Fiona have to, you know? And I have these thoughts when I'm asleep, when she's asleep and she's lying there and she looks like a piece, and I'm thinking the minute she wakes up, she's going to have this take her life over again. She'd be better off if I was dead. That's what you think. That's the illness. So you must never, ever, whenever anybody kills themselves, I just think, oh, you know, they've gone right over there. They've gone to the worst possible mind frame you're ever going to get.
What do you think, Fiona, when you're listening to him saying that?
So it's absolutely terrifying and also incomprehensible to me. And I think that's one of the problems. I mean, I've been unhappy in my life, you know, with bereavement, things like that, but I've never felt depression. So one can sort of sympathise, but it's really hard to empathise fully because you just don't know what it feels like.
Let's take some questions, should we? I think the first one is from Pat Hughes, and Pat's been listening and has a question for us. Hello to you, Pat. Good evening.
Hello there. Thank you very much for this session. Really appreciating it. I did submit 2 questions. I'm not sure which of them, so maybe I'll be cheeky and ask both. And the first question was really, to Alastair, is there anything that Fiona or anybody else could have done to make you get help sooner? I'm speaking as the mother of a 40-year-old who is severely depressed and has developed an eating disorder, but will not talk to a health professional, seemed to do reasonably in terms of being in contact with us during lockdown. And since lockdown has been is releasing, he's distanced himself and not responding to us anymore. And I'm just wondering if there's anything anybody could have done to help you get help sooner. And then I think Kay has already referred to Fiona and the support group. And I'm just wondering what needs to happen to create a group similar to Al-Anon, perhaps, for those of us who are desperate to help people and just don't know how and are at our wits' end.
Okay. Alastair.
Well, I think on the first one, it's very, very hard because, as Fiona said earlier, when I was heading to my breakdown in 1986, and she would say, "I'm really worried about you," and Bob, her dad, he's really worried about you, and your friends are really worried about you. I'd say, you know, I don't know what you're worried about. You're the ones with the problem. If you think I've got a problem, you've got a problem. It's very, very hard. And we saw the same with Callum, our son, that, you know, until he accepted that there was a problem to be addressed, it's very, very difficult. I think all you can do is don't judge, don't say things like, you know, all you need to do is, or, you know, you've got a great life, why are you thinking so negatively? Just accept that they're in a bad place. And I think try to work out, sometimes the unlocking of this won't necessarily be a relative, might be a friend, might be a colleague. I think finding out within your son's circle who there might be who actually could unlock that. And it's not often people really, really don't want to admit they're ill, and that's why they don't want to see a professional, but somebody can act as the kind of halfway house on that. And I don't know, probably Fiona's the better one to ask about the Al-Anon thing, but I do think there is a, you know, and I'm slightly worried about Fiona taking this on and this becoming like a massive thing. But I think that local groups hopefully could set up, maybe even out of tonight, there could be a few people who'd say, look, why don't I try and set up a group and we can do the same thing. Let's
let Fiona come in on that. Yeah, Fiona, thoughts?
I think one of the things, I mean, I've been to Al-Anon meetings, so I should have said that before. Yeah, I was really thinking about Al-Anon rather than Alcoholics Anonymous, but the principles of meetings are quite similar. I've been to both. I mean, the great thing at the moment is everybody's got used to doing so many things online. So we couldn't do a meeting in person when we set the group up because of lockdown. So we did it on Zoom. And in fact, it's much easier. So there are people meeting from all over the country. In fact, there's one person who comes from another country out of the United Kingdom, a British person. So I think it has great potential, and my aim is to try and, once we get enough people, to see if people can then go off and set up we need to work out the optimum size for a start. Is it going to be good with 5 people, 10 people? Is 20 people too many? Because, you know, in the Al-Anon meetings, they can get up to hundreds in some of these huge meetings, or mostly that's in America. But, and then try and get other people to host the meetings and set them up. And I think it will sort of snowball that way. And it, you know, I think the idea of having a sort of online chat facility as well is probably quite useful. And the idea of sponsors, you know, they have an Alcoholics Anonymous, you have somebody that you can always phone just to talk to. Yeah.
Okay, let's bring in our next guest this evening, and it's James Maxwell. James has been listening and has a question for you. Hello to you, James. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Norm. I want to ask a question on how mental health has impacted your children. So my question is, how open have you been with your children on your mental health? And have you found it hard to reconcile your parenthood with your vulnerability?
Thank you, James. Do you want to pick up on that to start with, Alastair? Yeah,
well, what happened when I first started going to see David Sturgeon's, that was 2005. That was when I decided, I actually did sit them down one by one. And they were all three of them were brilliant. Grace, our daughter, has always been the one she's so open about her own sort of feelings and so forth. And she was always the one, even when she was actually quite a small child, if I was lying on the sofa, she would literally sort of say, you know, what is wrong with you? What can we do? Why are you like this? Why are you doing this? Why can't you talk to me more? And I would really then try. And she's always been right. The boys have been a bit more kind of, you know, slightly just standing off a bit from it. But I actually sat the three of them down one by one. I remember with Callum, it was just, this shows you how our life has improved in so many ways. It was just before a Luton-Burnley game, and we were in a cafe in Luton. And I said, look, I want to tell you something. You know that I have these really kind of low moods. And I want to, first of all, I want you to understand you and Callum, you and Rory and Grace and Mum, one amongst the few people who actually helped me when I'm like this. You must never, that was the point David had made to me, you must never ever blame yourself. And then the second thing was that, you know, I've really made the decision that I'm going to get help, and I'm going to stick with the help until I feel better. So I think that definitely helped. And I think all three of them have had, you know, Callum and obviously most, you know, dramatically, I guess, with the alcoholism, and Grace with her anxiety, but they've all had their issues. And I hope that they feel they can always be open with us, because we've been, but latterly, so open with them.
And Fiona, do you feel that you were protecting the children from the bleaker depressive episodes that Alastair was going through? Did you feel that you could protect them?
I do, and I still worry about the impacts that they have on them that we don't know about. And that's the trouble. And I think it would be much better if we could all talk about mental health from a much earlier age in the way we do about physical health, so that children do feel more able to ask questions and, you know, raise concerns and talk about their own mental health. I think there's not enough of that going on. So, I mean, they're great young people, but I still worry about it. And I think we don't know enough about the impacts of parents with mental health issues on children. We know about mums who are depressed when, you know, postnatal depression and so on. But I still beat myself up too much about it. I think that we didn't do enough to protect them from the impact.
I know you want to come back in, Alice, but there's lots of people that want to ask questions. So let me press on, if I may. Karen Day wants to ask a question. Hello to you, Karen. Good evening.
Hi there. My question is, how do we normalise disability, or talking about disability and mental health within public discourse?
Well, partly by, I mean, did you see, did you watch, I'm sure virtually everybody did you watch Line of Duty? And what was the actor, Tommy
Jessup.
Tommy Jessup. What was the character he played?
Terry Boyle.
Terry Boyle, yeah. I mean, I thought that was, of all the great things about Line of Duty, for me, that was one of the best. The fact that they had an actor with really severe learning difficulties who was playing such a significant role within that. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I think culture, actually, and media is incredibly important. And so, for example, I think it's the answer to your question is in your question. How do you normalize it? We have to normalize it. You know, it's when you have, say, like, for example, if Kay were to ask you to go and to talk on Sky News about something to do with your life, because it was genuinely newsworthy, then I think what would, Kay probably not, because Kay kind of gets all this stuff. But I think with a lot of television people, they think, oh, we'd have to explain why he's you know, not talking like most people who come and who talk. We'd have to explain all that. Well, no, you don't. No, you don't. You just have to accept that some people have learning disabilities, some people have physical disabilities, and we've got to live with them. So I think, you know, we normalize it by normalizing it. Kay, can I just jump in? Because I've seen a question that I really, really want to answer.
Of course.
It's from Peter Chadlington, who, and Peter, it's lovely that you're on there. Peter Chadlington, for those who don't know, he's a member of the House of Lords. He's a bloody conservative, but he's actually a very, very good bloke when it comes to mental health. And it's something I know he really cares about and has done a lot for. And his question is very short. He says, I want to ask about suicide websites. And funny enough, I was at a meeting earlier today with the DCMS minister, Caroline Dinenage. I think she was a bit shocked, but Owen Paterson, the Tory MP, asked me to go with him, and Richard Burgard was there as well. So it was quite a sort of little delegation, plus Samaritans, plus Mind. And because, you know, as you probably all know, Owen Paterson's wife took her life last year. And Owen says he had no idea, he did not see it coming, he just did not see it coming. And I mean, you know, he was in Westminster, gets a phone call, she's gone missing. By the time he gets there, they've got police helicopters around the place. They find her body hanging from a tree. He has to go. He actually wanted to go. He said, I must go and see her. Do not take her down till I've seen her. And then when the police went through her laptop, she'd been looking at these suicide websites for some time, even while she was displaying positivity and looking after the kids and happiness and busyness and running Aintree race course. She was looking at these sites. And people, you know, we had Ian Russell on the Good Morning Britain yesterday, whose daughter, Molly, killed herself, and he's very angry with Instagram. And, you know, quite right and on many levels. But honestly, these websites that Peter is talking about, they are of a scale that you would not believe. And now it's difficult. And to be fair to Caroline Dinenage, I think she understands it is not, these are not easy issues, because it's all, you know, I did point out to her that when you've got this sort of, you know, cancel culture, Daily Telegraph campaign about university campuses, it all gets mixed up in this free speech stuff. But the fact is, some of this stuff, I would argue, is exhorting and encouraging suicide. And we have to find ways, with all the difficulties of technology and the pace of its development, we've got to find ways of dealing with this. And I really think that Owen Paterson will become a very, very powerful advocate in this area, because it's pretty hard for a minister in the House of Commons to stand up and say, we're doing everything we can, to somebody who's standing there saying, well, I know what happened to my wife because I did not have a clue what was going on. And she was trawling these suicide sites. And, you know, I don't even want to say what they do or what they say. They're utterly disgusting.
I suppose lots of people listening will say, well, why aren't they just shut down?
Because they can open up again, because, you know, this is the way technology is developing. It's like, you know, and I do understand it's difficult. So, for example, I talked to somebody at Instagram yesterday before doing the thing with Ian Russell, and she was making the point that, you know, it's Instagram, for example, in America, there's been from Facebook and Instagram, the algorithms can now point them, they're allowed to point them to the emergency services when they see people displaying suicidal symptoms. Because of the data protection laws here, that can't be done. So that's one of the things that I know Ian Russell is campaigning for, that actually you should be allowed, an outsider should be allowed to say that is dangerous suicidal behavior. So you've got to, it's getting the balance right. But look, I don't know is the answer, Kate. The answer is because it's very difficult technically to do it. And I don't think we've begun to understand just how hard these technological issues are. But if you don't have the big tech companies understanding that and being more responsible, then we're in a very, very dark place. And some of them are, they're terrifying, because the user-generated stuff will push you to these websites and push you to them. Before you know it, you might just start out with a casual interest in, you know, suicide, because it's a big thing. By the time you've sort of typed in suicide 20 times, you're being taken to these things, which are not just telling you how to do it, they're telling you that it's going to be good for you.
We've got lots more people to talk to, so you'll have to come on the telly box and talk to me about that in more detail in the fullness of time. But Leah Middleton's got a question for us in the meantime. Hello to you, Leah. Good evening.
Hi, evening, everybody. Thanks.
Hi.
Alastair and Fiona. I think it's been really fantastic listening to you. And I really found it very powerful, the two of you talking, and I thought to hear from you, Fiona, I do think it's true that people don't really understand that experience of caring for somebody. But the thing that I found really interesting was also partly the discussion about anger as well, because I feel very strongly that depression is misunderstood. And my question, I suppose, is that clinical depression is so different from being generally depressed as people talk about themselves. Do you think if there was another term for it, it might help people to...
Fiona, do you want to let Fiona speak?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the number of times in my life that, you know, I've casually thrown away that line saying, well, I'm feeling really depressed, or I hear people say it. Well, I wasn't depressed, and they're mostly not depressed. They're having a bad day, they're fed up, you know, they're angry, something's gone wrong. That is nothing like being depressed. And you're absolutely right. That word should be reserved for people who are generally seriously depressed. And I really hope that the fact that more people who've got depression are talking about it. In fact, I did Google the number of books there are about depression. It's only Alastair's. I'm afraid to say that there is going to become more awareness of the fact that this is an illness. It's not just a sort of fleeting state of mind. It is an illness, like cancer.
Alastair?
Yeah, look, I don't know. It's like I'd like to change lots of things about the language of. I actually prefer, for example, I prefer bipolar disorder to manic. I prefer manic depression to bipolar disorder, and that got changed. There's this. I've forgotten what it's called now. It's a big sort of mental health. It's called the Mental Health Bible. It's an encyclopedia, and it's an American thing, and but that's like the official, and the language stuff. It does change over time. You know, whether maybe we call it a depressive illness, because as we've seen with the whole commit suicide language, it's very hard when language is set in the way that we use it. And I guess do I mind when people say, oh, I'm so depressed because it's raining, or I'm so depressed because Burnley haven't won for 4 weeks in a row. I do sometimes say, no, you're not depressed, you're just a bit, you know, fed up with it. It's difficult. I don't quite know how we get out of that one, but there's one body, I've forgotten what it's called now because I'm so tired, but this medical definition thing is incredibly important, and it does evolve. So if that debate is happening, you know, we can change that.
Okay. Trevor Stevens standing by for us, I think. Hello to you, Trevor. Good evening.
No, I think, Kay, I texted you to say call Trevor Stevens. It's just because I saw his question there. I thought it was.
Yeah, I think he's there.
Oh, sorry, Kay.
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Trevor. Good evening.
Okay. I mean, there have been loads of interesting issues that have been brought up in the conversation in the last hour, and I'd love to talk about all of them. But as I said at the start, 5 months ago, my 19-year-old daughter took her own life. We had no idea. It was like the politician's wife, similar to that. We had no idea that she was in such desperate straits. But my specific question is about celebrities in the media talking about, saying specifically, well, when somebody said this to me, I felt like killing myself. And there are two specific examples. One of them is Meghan Markle, and the other one was, I think she's called Karen Carney. I think she's a football pundit. Yeah. And I just wonder whether you think that celebrities saying things like that trivialize the seriousness of these mental health problems.
No, I don't actually. No, I think the debate can get trivialized around them, and I think we saw that with Meghan Markle in particular. You know, I think it's fair to say that's probably one of the reasons why I was in the Good Morning Britain chair this week. I think it's very hard. If I did have a little bit of a spat with Piers Morgan on social media yesterday, because he did a tweet saying, you know, I'd love to know how many of these celebrities talking about their mental health have monetized it and how much money they're making about talking about their own mental health. And I think when you know, question, I don't know Meghan Markle, I've never met her. And, you know, it's perfectly reasonable and fair for all of us to have a view saying, I like her, I don't like her, I think she's a good thing, I think she's a bad thing. But I don't think any of us have a right to say what's going on inside her mind. And on the programme this morning, there's a documentary on tonight by Charlene White and Trevor McDonald about racism in Britain. And so Charlene, she's a black woman journalist. Now, black woman journalist, online media hate, you've got three of the big ones there: black woman and a journalist with opinions. You're getting a lot of online hate. And she was on the programme today, and she said that, you know, I've had racism all my life, but this is the reaction I've had when I've been talking about the George Floyd stuff. It's the first time, no, when she pulled out of the press awards because she didn't agree with the press statement saying we're not racist, the Society of Editors, and she pulled out. She said, it's the first time I've had a racist abuse that has reduced me to tears. Now, when that happens, you know, she said today, she is bracing herself tonight, 9 o'clock, the programme starts. She says she's bracing herself. And I said, well, don't look at it. She said, yeah, but the thing about that is that, you know, you do need to know what's, because it's part of the debate. You want to know whether it's generating it or challenging it. So I think it's difficult, but I actually, look, I'd much rather it wasn't just celebrities who were talking about this. And one of the reasons I did the documentary was to talk to, quotes, ordinary people about their depression. And Fiona and I have been talking, maybe we might do this, about doing a television program where we go and talk to ordinary people who are in our situation. That's the other way to normalise this.
Given that, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but given that you have brought up Piers Morgan and what he said about Meghan Markle, are you critical of what he said about her?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with Piers. It goes back a long, long, long way. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think on COVID, he's been one of the best at holding the government to account, you know. But I think what Piers has always been, and you know, as this is kind of what the tabloids do and what modern media is, a lot of it's about. He's made himself into a huge personality where his views carry weight, and I think on that, look, I think there probably is racism in parts of the royal establishment. You know,
talking particularly about mental health issues, and he said that he didn't believe that she. Yeah,
he said, I think you can say I don't like her. I think you can say that, but I think on talking about that, you don't. Look, I am a bit critical of that, but I also think, to be, you know, and I once called him out before because he actually once said something. He says, look, I don't mind Alastair Campbell talking about mental health because I get the feeling that it's real, right? Well, he's not a doctor. He's not a doctor. He doesn't know if somebody else's mental illness is any more real than mine or anybody else's. So, look, I don't want to.
Can I just say that I think actually Trevor's right. I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. It must be every parent's nightmare. But I think you have hit on quite an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about, which is the sort of, in our rush to get everybody talking about mental health, which I think is a good thing, that it could become glamorized and then have a perverse effect on some impressionable young people. So that is something we should also be aware of. Yeah.
I mean, I can remember, look, I remember there was another one, what was her name? Somebody wrote a big article, Janet Street Porter, I think it was. And it was like, she said, you know, this is just after I started talking about depression's becoming the must-have accessory. If it wasn't her, I apologize in advance, but somebody wrote that piece, the must-have accessory for the modern celebrity. Now, if you've had depression, believe me, you do not want it as an accessory. So there may be people who think, oh, this mental illness thing looks quite interesting. Maybe I'll get into that, but I don't think so.
Let's move on, should we, and bring in Lauren White next. Hello to you, Lauren. Good evening.
Hello.
Hi, Lauren. Hi.
My question is kind of about something that I've been talking about since I was literally like 14 years old. And it's, should there not be a national education programme in schools about mental health, given that obviously the discussion tonight with Fiona's talked about how she can't sort of empathise, but she can understand, like she can kind of understand what's going on. But this is only after living with Alastair and his depression for so many years. And I just think if there was this kind of programme taught in schools, then people would be able to identify what's going on with others. And also people who are suffering would be able to identify it within themselves sooner. I was just wondering what everyone thinks about that.
100%.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really important point. I think we spend far too much time just cramming kids full of facts to pass exams and not worrying enough about their well-being. and helping them to understand the things that will in life ensure that they are happy and healthy. And that is, at the end of the day, much more important than 9 A stars or 9 level 9s or whatever they're called now. So yeah, I would say, not go back beyond 14. Let's start in primary schools. Absolutely. Kids should be encouraged to talk about their feelings. And if they don't feel good, they should be encouraged to understand why they don't feel good and what they can do to help themselves. And
we had Nadine Dorries on the programme the other day, a mental health minister, and she came on with this big announcement, £70 million for mental health support in schools. It works out at £2 per child. I don't know how that's going to work out. And, if you remember during the Labour government, one of the best things I think we did, we had that whole classroom assistance, development of classroom assistants, just, help teachers in the classroom. I think we would end up saving ourselves billions over the next few decades if we had that, mental health support in every classroom. There's not a classroom in the country that's not going to have children with mental health consequences out of COVID. There's not a single classroom in the country. Now, and I think that sort of model would actually lead to us saving on prisons in the future, saving on domestic violence, saving on kids lapsing into crime and all the other stuff that goes on. So Lauren, and by the way, Lauren, I can't, if you're the same Lauren who follows me very, very closely on social media, I can't believe you're a Geordie. I've had a picture and I've always thought you were a Londoner. I don't know why.
Guys, we're almost out of time, but as you said when you were promoting the event, Alastair, I couldn't let you get away without answering a question or two about politics, and you've sort of touched on it there. Your views on Boris Johnson, well documented. I'm sure that Fiona's heard many of them over the kitchen table, but let me ask you about Sir Keir Starmer. Do you think he will win a general election for Labour?
I think Labour's in a very, very dangerous place. I mean, Tony Blair and I were talking about this on Good Morning Britain this morning. I fear that this could be existential. And, so it all depends on the decisions that are made in the next few months, actually. If Labour think their problem is just one of unity and squabbles between, Angie and Keir and, all that stuff, then we've had it. It's got to be about the policy agenda. Tony was interesting on the telly this morning, because you're right, Fiona hears me raging about this, because I've known Johnson for, decades. I know who he is, I know what he is, and it sort of sickens me actually that he's Prime Minister, because he's the last thing we need as Prime Minister at a time like this. But Tony's much maybe broader minded politically, and he said, you've just got to understand he's got an appeal to people who want characters, who give them positivity and energy and boost. People like that about him. If he doesn't execute on the levelling up agenda, then Labour's back in. But that then depends on Labour policy. But
that's about Boris losing as opposed to Labour winning.
Exactly. And one of my other books.
I called him Boris, and you're very cross about that.
No, I don't like it. Yeah. But one of my other books, Winners, one of the best quotes in there is from Gary Kasparov. He's one of the cleverest men I've ever met. And he said, chess champion, one of your, he said that waiting for your opponent to fail is never a strategy. Labour has to have its own strategy about its own policies, and not about, is it Blairism, is it Corbynism? It's what's in the future. So I'm afraid both of us are incredibly frustrated about the state of our politics, right across the piece.
But what's the answer to my question? Do you think he'll win a general election for Labour?
I think he can. But I think he can. And Labour ought to be able to beat this government, because they're wretched, they're useless, they're corrupt, they've screwed up Brexit, they've screwed up COVID. That Queen's speech yesterday was all about, talk about people's priorities, no social care, nothing about the peace process in Northern Ireland and all this reconciliation stuff, nothing about renters, nothing about Grenfell, all the stuff that was big people's priorities. And they come along with this crap about voter ID and banning foie gras and adverts for elephant rides on holiday. They're beatable. They're beatable.
Yeah, but from what you're saying, unless they change. Okay, let me ask you one final question before I let you go. How would you, if you were advising the party now, what would you tell them to do, the Labour Party?
Make a choice about the direction you're going to take and take it. Don't.
And is that to move closer towards the centre, like you did with Blair?
Definitely. I mean, look, the centre ground at the moment is a gaping hole, because Boris Johnson's become the Brexit party and a sort of populist, I think actually populist authoritarian authoritarian government, potentially. That's all that curbing, you know, protest, judicial review, fixed term Parliament Act, the voter ID, that's all Orban. It's even Putin, actually. And the thing about, oh no, I'm serious, Kay, I'm serious about this, because this thing about politicians who lie, we got called liars, we still do every single day about Iraq when we didn't. We get called out over lies we didn't tell. This guy lies on virtually a daily basis and doesn't get called out. And it's always been one of the key tools of authoritarians. There's a brilliant book about Putin called Nothing is True, Everything Becomes Possible. That's what they're doing. So this.
Yeah, I think Boris does get called out when he actually turns up for interviews. He doesn't tend to want to be interviewed.
Okay, that's the point. He doesn't turn up. He doesn't get scrutinised.
Yeah. Fiona, we could go on all night. I'm sure you've heard these arguments so many times before. It's Alastair's birthday on the 25th of this month. What are you planning for him?
Oh, well, unfortunately, I can't tell you because we're having a very, very top secret staycation and he doesn't know where we're going yet. So
Burnley, it's Burnley. She's taking me to the Burnley-Liverpool game.
I'm amazed he hasn't shown more interest, but I don't really want him to start probing because I really want it to be a surprise. And we haven't had a holiday in the UK for so long, so there you go.
Okay.
Oh, that's a real first world problem, that we haven't had a holiday in the UK. We went to Scotland last year.
Oh, that's true, yeah. We went to Cornwall as well, that's true.
By the way, Kay, can I say, so to all the people who've asked questions that haven't been answered, if they want to email my website, I can just do them tomorrow.
And also forward anything on to me if they want any information about joining the group. That's great.
Yeah, I was going to give you the opportunity to thank everybody before we went, but I just wanted to ask you whether you're going back to GMB anytime soon.
Yeah, I've just signed a contract. Apparently Piers was on 1.2 million. They've offered me 6 million. And I've said I'll do it, but only if I can do it from the Lido every morning. And if it's a weekend game from Turf Moor. So that's the deal. If they want to take it, it's up to them.
Have they really offered you the opportunity to go back?
Yeah, they've said, would I be interested in doing more? And I need to think about it, because the truth is, one of the things that has got my mental health into a better place is that Fiona and I got our lives into a better place. And, you know, Fiona said earlier, I do get obsessed. I do get obsessive about stuff. And even like 3 days this week, today I feel utterly exhausted because I've absolutely, you know, I did a lot of work on that. I was up at 2 in the morning because I was researching an interview with George Eustace. You know, I do get very, the work takes me over if I'm not careful. So I'm gonna wait till the end of the week, think about it, and then probably give it another go if they want me to, but not commit beyond that, and just see where it goes.
Final thought from you, Fiona?
I think this is an awful thing to say, but I quite enjoyed having him out of the house. Sorry. After a year of being together at 24/7. I mean, honestly, I've never known a time like it. And I'm sure other people in that situation. It was good to see him out and about doing things again. So, yeah.
And I'm sure, Alastair, that you want to thank people that have taken time out of their evening. I know this event was sold out to listen to what you and Fiona have to say. No,
listen, the thing, Fiona, when I first started talking about mental health, both my mum and Fiona weren't very happy about it. I think Fiona thought I was through the worst with all the stuff with the media and all that. And my mum hated having me in the public eye anyway, because, you know, and she once said to Tony Blair on the phone, I said to my mum, I said to Tony, look, give her a ring and tell her this is not as bad as it seems, because she's really in a state. And he phoned, and anyway, the conversation ended with it. Anyway, Tony, I must rush because I'm afraid all this stuff that you're making Alastair do, it's giving me really bad diarrhea. So they didn't want me to do this, but I actually do feel a real sense of, Owen Patterson said something about this today. He said that, you know, losing Rose in the way that he's done has made him feel he's now got a massive responsibility to stop other families going through what his family is going through. And I feel that the skills that I have, I don't want to go back into politics in the way that I've done it before. I feel that any skills that I have in communications, in campaigns, in strategy, in political argument and so forth, I feel that this is an area where I can make a difference. And Fiona might want to hear this, but I do think that what her chapter has led to already means that she can play a big part in this as well. And I think that I talk about changing the lens on mental illness. I think we need to completely change the lens on it, back to the question about normalization, so that we eventually get to a place where we're actually, I think we're going to look back one day and say, God, did you really think, you know, that it used to be asylums where you put people in them because they shouldn't be allowed out in society, and people used to think that if you had OCD or schizophrenia or psychosis, you could never work again. And, you know, and I think if we get it right, we'll end up changing the criminal justice system, the prisons and probation system, education, the lot. And so I think this is, you know, I want to do this more than anything at the moment.
Okay, Alastair, Fiona, thanks very much indeed. Thanks also to Pat Hughes, to Karen Day, to James Maxwell, to Liam Middleton, to Trevor Stevens, Lauren Weiss as well, and all those other people that sadly couldn't put their questions to Fiona and Alastair this evening. I'm sure that Alice will tell us a little bit more about where we can get the book, but thank you both for your efforts this evening.
Thank you, you've been brilliant. You've been brilliant. What a pro you are, what a pro. All that by looking at a couple of websites.
Alice.
And thank you from me as well to all of you for a really moving and also interesting conversation this evening. It's been yeah, a real treat to listen to you. So thank you all very much. If you ordered a book as part of your ticket this evening, they will be dispatched over the next few days, and they will be with you within 10 working days if you live in the UK, and it will take longer than that if you live outside of the UK. Obviously, I don't have all the international shipping times off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Don't get him going about Brexit.
But if you would like more information on shipping times,
it is about Brexit. It is about Brexit.
Shut up.
And we will get back to you on that. If you haven't ordered a copy of the book yet and you would like to now rectify that, I've dropped a link into the chat where you can go and get a copy of Living Better by Alastair Campbell, and I would recommend that, especially if you've enjoyed the event this evening, you should all do so. If you did have a good time this evening, please do take a look at blackwells.co.uk/events at what we've got coming up over the next few weeks. Our online programme is it's very busy and we've got a lot of different things going on, so do take a look at that if you're interested. But for now, thank you, Kay Burley, for chairing such a wonderful conversation this evening. Thank you, Alastair and Fiona, for sharing so much and yeah, talking so openly and helpfully about your experiences. It's been a really wonderful event. Thank you, everybody at home who's watched and asked questions, and I hope to see you all at another Blackwells event very soon. Thank you very much and good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.